Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Lowry, and I'm very happy to bring you this interview today with Lorna Schultz Nicholson. She is a children's author, a young adult author as well, and has published a number of books here, 46 books in total after this fall, after the next release of the next 3 books are coming out. So she has an amazing number of books out there, and she has a lot to say on writing and in her books too as well. So I'm very pleased to introduce Lorna. Do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm pleased to be here too. Thank you, Vincent. I really, really appreciate being on your show. It's going to be
You're
fun.
welcome. You're welcome. It's so great to have you here. Lorna, when I was going through some of your interview questions over here, what I found amazing is that your transition into writing, and one of the things that you talked about is that you acted in theater. And so would you speak to that a little bit about how theater kind of was the process to get you into writing too? As you said, that was a time you kind of started up your writing career.
Well, I had done a lot of things in my life. Like I was, I feel very, very fortunate with the many things that I've done in my life. And I think for writers out there, aspiring writers, like, don't look at your age as being something that is a hindrance, because all the experiences that you've had prior to your writing are something that you can use in your writing. So I did a lot of things, and the theater, of course, it does help you because it gives you a sense of character. I think that that's what's the beauty of theater, is that you get that sense of character. You also get that sense of dialogue, because dialogue in scripts is so cut and dried, right? And so when you get into writing a novel, let's say, you can use that dialogue to help you push, get the character across, but you're not using too much dialogue. So that's a really interesting component of theater. I did murder mysteries. I did a lot of improv as well. So that was a really fun component too. And that's thinking on your feet. So that helps the writing process as well. And I always loved to write. Like, I was a writer right from the time I was a kid, but I kind of got out of it. But yet I was one of those people who wrote in university. Sometimes I'd take the little essay and I'd switch it around and make a short story. And sometimes I got, this was very creative, and other times I got, this isn't what we asked for. So I always had that mindset of like turning everything into a short story.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's what was amazing reading about your background, because you've written in magazines, you've written in newspapers, a newspaper column that you're running to as well. You had scripts at one point too as well. So it's a wide range of areas that you are involved in as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite a task. I know that's it's work to make sure, especially for newspapers and magazines, to get those articles done and get that out there for the audience. So it's a lot of work to do that. Then that's when you started writing children's work, and you said you had children of your own that inspired you for children's work. And talk a little bit about that.
I hope he's not listening, but I had a son. I had a son who didn't really like to read, so that was a bit of a struggle, right? So, and the first book I ever published was a middle grade hockey novel, and my son was a hockey player, and he loved anything to do with hockey, so he would read that, and I thought that there was an area there that I could be writing about, that I could get some boys to read, because that was really important to me. And he read them, and it was really great because he would do his book reports on my books. But then finally, after a while, I said, honey, like, you have to use somebody else's book. Like, you can't just use your mother's books. So then he branched out, and I introduced him to some other authors that were writing the same kind of book. And that really, so then that inspired him. But it was really interesting because I wrote one in this series that was had the female protagonist. And he said to me, why did you write that book about a girl? Like, none of my friends are going to read that book. And then I found him downstairs reading the book, and I said, oh, you're reading about Carle. And he sort of looked at me like, yeah, and it's pretty good. Like, he liked it, right? So that was really interesting. I was really happy about that he picked up and was reading a book with a female character. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I had children of my own. So I drew a lot in those first sort of books that I wrote. I drew a lot from my kids, and I did a lot of like just sitting in the van, like driving them to and fro, and listening to their dialogue. like just listening to what they were talking about and how they talked and the euphemisms that they were using. And I was able to make the language then kid friendly because I was always listening to them and tuning into them of how they spoke.
Yeah, it's an important thing for dialogue to make sure that it clicks and that it rings true. Because when you're reading a book, it makes that much more of an impact. And you're saying, well, this is real. This is what I would experience if I was going through this. Yeah.
Especially with children's literature.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
very, very
it's
true.
important in children's literature to get that voice right.
That's right. That's right. And not sound like an adult.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not easy.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. It's a kind of an art to it, as they'd say. The 3 new books, I wanted to get into those 2 as well, so that we can get to talk about those, because it's outstanding. You have these coming out in the next, is it fall? Is that when they're all due?
Yeah, I have 2 in September.
Okay.
With Scholastic Canada. One is a nonfiction, and it's a series that I write. It's called the Amazing Hockey Story Series. So it is nonfiction. So I write both fiction and nonfiction, and I like both. Like I do both. And it's on Alexander Ovechkin, which was really fun to write. He plays for the Washington Capitals. And I liked it because he was Russian. So I got to sort of get into the research of minor hockey in Russia. And I like that because his mother was an Olympic basketball player during the Red Army days. So there was a little bit more to it than just, than writing about a Canadian player. So that was really fun. And I was fortunate to have some Russian friends who knew all about him, and I would talk to them. I phoned Russia to try to chat and get some conversation going. So I have that one. And it's really cool because it's text, real pictures, and then it's also has some graphics in it, which is really fun. So it's a good read. If my son had been around when these books were here, he would have devoured these books. And maybe he would have gone to the Scholastic Book Fair and not spent his $10 on erasers and pencils, and he would have bought a book. I used to tell him, you have to buy a book. You can't just come home with a poster. Anyway, and then the second book is a novel. And it's a middle grade novel that's coming out with Scholastic, and it's a hockey novel as well. And it's got a lot more to it though. Like when I say it's a hockey novel, that's the basis of it, but yet there's grief, and it's about a boy who has his father passes away, and they have to move from Florida to small town Alberta, and his anxiety with trying out for this new hockey team, and anxiety about having no friends, and all of the not living up to his dad, because his dad was a really good hockey player. So there's lots of stuff going on in the book, and then there's some leadership components as what it is to be a good leader. So there's lots going on in the novel that if I say it's a hockey novel, I hesitate for teachers and parents and grandparents and anybody to go, okay, well, that's not for my child, because there's so much more to it than just the hockey action.
And the name of that is Taking the Ice, correct?
It's Taking the Ice, yeah, Taking the Ice. So we played around with that title, and that's what we came up. The first title was Team Chaos, and it became, and that tells a lot. But then we decided to go with Taking the Ice. So that's the 2 that are in September, and then I have a young adult novel. And I know you said that you wrote some young adult work. I have a young adult novel that's coming out in November. It's called When You Least Expect It, and it is about a rower, like a rower. And I was a rower in high school and actually past high school. So I really, this one is kind of near and dear to me because of the sport that I was involved in. And it's about a girl, and she gets cut from a rowing team. And years ago, I got cut from a rowing team that I really wanted to be on. So there's a little bit of me there. And then she meets somebody who coaches her in a single, but then she hears about his tragic story. So, and I wrote some verse in that one. So there's a secondary character, and there's a verse component to it. So that was really different for me. And I learned with every single book something new. And no matter how many books you publish, every single book, there's something new that you learn, and there's some new sort of writing skill that you have to tackle. And I tackled that verse component in it. It's not a lot, like it's before every chapter, there's a little verse section, and it's a different character. So it was a way for me to get that character, because the fellow who coaches her, of course, is older. And in a young adult novel, I didn't want to have an adult character. I wanted teens. So I'm not going to give away the story, but it tells his story. It is a teen character, but it was a way for me to tell his story, and have that come through. And I really wanted that. And I had to have a vehicle to tell his story as well, because that's really important to the novel.
Absolutely. And in terms of time frame for each of these books, because it's great they have 3 books that are coming out here. Was it a couple of years to write these, or a year?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like when I think of Taking the Ice, like I probably Scholastic said that they wanted it. I mean, it took a good year before I handed it into my editor for her to actually accept it. Mm-hmm. And then they did that was in June. And then they said, well, it'd be coming out not that fall, but the following fall. And then they changed that, and they said it's going to come out the following fall after that. So I mean, that one's been like 3 or 4 years. And, I actually pitched that novel to another publishing house, like I want to say, I don't know, like 6 years ago. And it was called My Friend Ned. And it never flew. So I sort of left it, and then I came back to it, and I kind of looked at it, and I thought, well, I could change it a little bit, and then send it to Scholastic, and they got it. So, but I pitched it ages ago, like probably when I think about that, was 6 or 7 years ago. So, I mean, it's been sitting around for a while. That's why it seems like I have a lot out, but that book was sitting around, right? So, right. And it never sold. So then I finally, after changing it and reworking it, it sold. And then the YA is just, yeah, I had been sitting on that one for a long time too. I wrote that and sat on it and didn't get there, and then it finally, I got it published. So
excellent.
It takes time, right? It takes time.
Yes. It's one of those things where it takes enormous amount of effort of revisiting manuscripts too as well, because sometimes as an author, as you said, you get a manuscript that just doesn't fly at first, and it sits in a drawer or on a computer, and you revisit it after a period of time and saying, well, what can I do with this now? Is there some way I could tweak it, edit it, and get it out there?
And sometimes you've grown as a writer. Well, obviously you have, because years have gone by if you've continued to write. So sometimes you've grown as a writer, and so that when you take a look at it, then you can say to yourself, okay, I understand why this didn't sell. Mm-hmm. I understand the problems now, and then you can go in and rework them and put that investment into them.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. So Taking on the Ice, and when you least expect it for that novel, was that more of a organic novel that kind of came up like more recently?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I've been mulling that one around for a long time too. And I really wanted to write about a rower, because mm-hmm. I did that sport. And it's probably the sport that I went to the highest level in during my time as an athlete. Yeah. And so I really wanted to write about it. I think it's an absolutely beautiful sport, but it was just how to tell the story. And so I had to kind of get there and think about how I was going to tell that story. And so it took a while to figure out how to get that voice of through the verse, mm-hmm. and how to get the information about the adult character into like a teen voice. So it was just, I had to think of how the structure of it. And I was really fortunate to get a wonderful editor for it. I was just delighted. He works with Red Deer Press, and he's retiring, and he's kind of a great Canadian children's lit editor. So I really felt in a way that when I got that editor, that I was just going to learn a lot in the process. And so I was delighted about that. Like, I was really excited to be able to learn something new again, just by working with this editor. And he really was brilliant. I've never worked with anybody who was so gentle, but yet made me dig so deep.
Yeah, that's good. And keep your voice.
Great.
Oftentimes with authors, there are many authors that are in our audience too as well, that they struggle to find editors that can keep their voice. Sometimes editors go through there and they chop it up and they say, this is what you should say, and this is how you should do it. And so, or editors maybe might not do enough, and they need to catch more things. it's a great balancing to find an editor who can do both, who can keep your voice but make those necessary edits in your manuscript, so that way it's polished, so that it rings true, so that way it makes a connection with the audience.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's tough to find, as you said.
Yeah.
We touched on this in the very beginning over here about the number of books that you've written. So this is a little bit outside the interview questions, but your very first book that you wrote, what was the title of that?
Interference was the first book I published. No, it's not the first book I wrote.
Okay, I
I have a few of those that never published. Yeah, I did. I had a few that never published. I mean, I had a couple there that I wrote, and I just couldn't publish them, so I just kept writing, and finally I got Interference published. And Interference is a middle grade hockey novel. And it's about a young boy that has type 1 diabetes, but he doesn't know that he has diabetes. And I took that from when I was rowing in high school. I had a really good girlfriend who we didn't know that she had diabetes. And I remember everything that she was going through of not being able to see. And then we went on a road trip and with our boat behind us, and she couldn't, she had to go to stop and go to the bathroom. So I remembered all of these things, and then I manipulated it as writers do, right? I took, I made it a boy, and I made him play hockey instead of rowing. So I sort of manipulated a little bit, but that was my very first novel that I published. So, and what's beautiful about that is my editor for that, Hadley Dyer, who is a great Canadian editor and writer. I asked her to give me a quote for When You Least Expect It, which is coming out in the fall. So she endorsed it for me. So I'm really thrilled about that, because I know it's lovely, because she was my very first editor, and she taught me a lot.
That's
I was very lucky.
And that was one of the questions I had too. From the very first book, as you said, that hadn't been published right away, so it published later on. But from the very first time you started writing to the more recent publications of these books, what have you learned as a writer? What have you learned through the process through the years? It's always a process of growing and of learning. And I always like to ask this of authors about what have you learned through all these books that you've written?
Well, I've learned that blank page to start off with on every single book is always challenging. Yeah. It doesn't matter how many books you've written. When you start that new book, you're starting all over again. You're starting back almost where you not where you started from, but you're starting with that blank page, and you still have to develop the characters. You still have to get the plot. You still have to think about what you're doing. But I have realized, in the past too, I can handle a deadline a little better, and I can take a few, and I don't want to call them risks with my writing, but maybe they are. And I found a few ways to kind of figure things out maybe a little better. Like if I'm really struggling, okay, then I go and I say, okay, like let's finish off an outline here, and let's just map out every chapter so that I can get to the end. Because sometimes when you get to the point where you're publishing a lot, you have to get to the end. Like, I have a deadline coming up in October on a book, and I sold it without writing it first. So I have to get this book done. So I was writing it the other day, about halfway through, and I thought, I gotta get to the end here. How am I going to do this? So I'm able to just do a chapter. Okay, now I know I can do it. And sometimes I'll work backwards. So I think that I've learned, number one, don't be afraid of that blank page, but do expect it, because every project is a new project, and it's a brand new project, and you're not back to the beginning, but you kind of are. And don't think that it's going to be easy, because it's not. You're still going to have challenges with every single new book. There's still going to be those moments where you're working on it and you're saying, oh, I don't know where this is going. And I that kind of thing, right? So every single book is going to be like that, but you can't be afraid of that anymore. You have to go, okay, this is my process. And I think that that's important, that we learn that. But I mean, as time goes on, I mean, I've written a lot of nonfiction now, so I've got a better handle on that. And I mean, every single book is a little different, right?
The next, that's right. And what I found really amazing too is that you have won several awards, Forrester Reading Awards, for instance. You've won that 5 times. Is that correct?
You know what? I've never won. I always say I'm the Susan Lucci of Kidlit and Canada. I'm always nominated.
Well,
I know I'm going red in the face, but it's true. I was nominated 5 years in a row. Like I get nominated, which is an honor. I mean,
it's an
don't
honor.
get me wrong. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm honored to be nominated. There's a lot of books out there, and just even to be nominated is a really big deal. And it is a big deal for sales. So your publishers, they're like, wow, okay, you're nominated, because then the kids are going to read the books in the life, and it's a children's choice, right? So that's it's just honored to be nominated. But yeah, and I've been up for a lot of other awards, probably in almost every province in Canada.
well,
Yeah.
you talked about one of your goals, reaching 50 books, and so every book that you put out is another potential opportunity to that nomination.
Oh,
Get that
100%.
goal.
I'm still hoping. I'll let
Yeah.
you know. I'll let you know. Everybody will know when it happens.
I have full confidence you'll get there. That's right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to talk about with authors too is that there are many distractions for kids of the world today. There's cell phones, there's iPads, there's movies, there's music, everything out there. What is an author that you do to write your books to try to connect, so that way that the kids will still be entertained, that they'll still pick it up and be engaged? How do you approach that as a writer?
Well, yeah, that's a really, really good question, because there are a lot of distractions for kids. And I think that as authors, we really want them to read. And as a like a mom, I want them to read, because I read when I was a kid, and I think reading is such a lovely experience. I just think that you can go so many places. You don't have to, go to Paris to read about Paris. And you can delve into the lives of other children, and and see what other kids are doing. So how to get there is just to constantly stay in touch with kids, and constantly stay in touch with what they are dealing with. Like, you can't go with what you dealt with when you were a kid, because they're dealing with different things right now. For instance, I had my brother's a physician, right? So we had this conversation, and he said, I see so many kids with anxiety these days. And that got me thinking, and that's with Taking the Ice, that's coming out in the fall. I had this boy who has some anxiety, and I had a daughter who had a little bit of anxiety. So I was able to put that into the book, but I think that's very common with kids right now. And there are a lot of kids, for whatever reason, I don't know, but this is happening, and doctors are seeing kids coming in that have anxiety. So therefore, that's a book that maybe somebody can pick up and read, and say, and then see themselves in it, and understand that they're not alone. So I think that staying in tune with kids and what's going on in their lives today is really important. And it's not going to be the same as what was in our life, unless you're writing historical fiction or something. And then, of course, you have to move into that genre, right? But the other thing is to keep the book, like the hockey books that I write, the nonfiction ones. As I said, they're text, they're photos, they're graphics. Like, there's 4 different graphic sections in the book. So it still follows chronologically, and it still follows a storyline. So for a kid's comprehension, that really works, right? Because they can get to a point where they're saturated, and it's like, oh, I can just read these 4 pages of graphics, and then they can move along. So I just think it's staying in tune with kids and what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you felt like audiobooks as well help reach the kids as well these days too, as well, having your books on tape, having it on CD, having on kind of an iPhone related device?
Probably, yeah. I would think that audiobooks would probably be good for kids, because kids do like to listen to podcasts. I mean,
Yeah.
people listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that an audiobook would be good, and then they can get the comprehension. And if that can push them to actually read a book that, like a physical book, then that's very helpful, right? Might
Yeah.
give them the confidence to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, out of all, you have so many books out there, and I asked you this question during the interview questions that I had sent to you. That what was one of the biggest compliments that you'd received as an author? from one of your fans out there, and it could encompass anything, but like anybody who might have said something to you that was really like, wow, it really touched you, it really hit you hard, or just, it could be for any of your books that you've ever written.
Well, I have one book. I have a book that I wrote called Fragile Bones, and it has a character with high functioning autism in it.
Mhm.
And it was the first one that was nominated for a Forest of Reading Award. And I went to the event and all the events, and there was all these things going on. And I got to do a lot of workshops with kids. And there was a boy that came up to me afterwards, and he just said, I've never seen myself in a book. And I'm really thankful that you wrote this book. Like, he finally saw a character in a book who was similar to him, and he appreciated that I had written a book where he could see himself. So he liked that. So that was one compliment. And then I always tell, I like the story of Susan Nielsen, who's a really wonderful, wonderful author in Canada, a really good kidlit author. And she said, we were at the Forest of Reading, and I guess all these kids came up to her and said, do you know where Lorna Schultz Nicholson's class is? Do you know where Lorna Schultz Nicholson's class is? I said, oh, wow, okay. And she was like, oh, God, you're so popular. I was like, oh, wow, okay. They were asking her instead of going up and saying, are you Susan Nielsen? So I always joke with her and tell her that I think that that's really funny that they thought to ask her instead of actually asking for her autograph, they were coming to look for me. I like that. But anyway, but it's all about the kids coming up to you. That's a funny story, but it's all about the kids coming up to you and relating to your book and just saying, I love this series. Like, I love these books. And that's a series that I wrote that have all kinds of diverse characters. So there was a boy with high functioning autism in one, a girl that's born with Down syndrome in another, a boy with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and then there's a girl with a brain injury. So it's based on the Best Buddies program. But I had a lot of kids that would come up to me and just say, I really loved your books, and I really related to the characters, and and if they can understand another human being better because they read my books, I've done my job. I don't need to win the award.
And that's what's amazing about children's books, kids' books, young adult books, is the ability to connect and to do it in a way they can do it over and over again, because it's a book. They can read it over again and get that feeling all over again. Like the kid with autism, I guarantee that's not the first time he's going to read that book. He's going to go return to that again and discover that all over again. I asked you this question about one of your favorite authors or favorite genres, and I know that's a very difficult question to answer. To narrow that down, to make it a little easier, in terms of children's books, what authors for you that stood out when you were a kid, or even now, that were like, wow, they just really impressed me. Like, I just love the way that they write, love the illustrations, or whatever it is about that particular author. Are there any authors on your mind that really struck you?
Well, when I was a kid, I mean, there weren't as many books, and I absolutely loved Anne of Green Gables. Like, that was one of my favorite books when I was a child. And I even, one summer when my kids were young, I have 3 children, and when they were, I don't know, they were like 10, maybe 8 and 11 or something like that, I read it to them one summer. Like, we had gone up to this cottage, and there wasn't any TV, there was nothing. So we, every day, to get out of the sun, we'd sit and I'd read a chapter, and I read the whole book to them because I was like, oh, I love this book so much when I was a kid. So that was one. And I loved Trixie Belden when I was a kid. I always wanted to be in the Bob Whites of the Glen Club. So I had a lot of books that I really loved when I was a kid. Pippi Longstocking. So there was a lot of different books that I really liked. And now, there's some great authors out there. And I like Heather Smith is a wonderful author, and Susan Nielsen, who I mentioned, is brilliant. She's got this brilliant sense of putting humor with tragedy. Like, she's amazing at it. So she's a good author. I'm just thinking, who wrote the book Speak? I love that book. Lori Halverson.
Okay, I think we'd have to look it up. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that one.
Anyway, it's a fabulous book, so good. So there's some good other authors too that I really go to. But yeah, I mean, I'm a really eclectic reader. So I pick up, I'll read a mystery, I'll read a thriller, I'll read a contemporary, I'll read historical. So I'm really eclectic with my reading. I just read whatever. Like somebody says it's a good book, I read it. Like I just finished Boys in the Boat, which is a nonfiction book, which is fantastic.
Fantastic, yeah, absolutely. There's an author that recently passed away that really touched me. It's a children's author, and that's Eric Carle. And so, with that author, I just remember being, and of course, when I was very young, having The Hungry Caterpillar, as well as a few of others books. And with the Caterpillar book in particular, I just remember seeing the holes in the book and just saying how neat it was to flip a page. And then there's the next thing that this caterpillar eats, and the illustrations that he had. And it was just such an amazing way of connecting with kids, and in a way that they could understand, in a way that was engaging, and in a way that was read over and over again. I have a son myself, and I read that book, The Hungry Caterpillar, as well as a few other Eric Carle books as well. And it's not just one reading; it's like over and over and over again. Like, I mean, it's amazing with children's books how many times they can be reread and going over the story once again. And it was an interesting story with Eric Carle. When I was reading about him, is he had a really difficult time publishing his book back then, because the way that it was formatted and the holes in it. A lot of American publishers saying we can't do this. Like, I know what you want to do, and I believe if I've got the story right, he had to go with a Japanese publisher to be able to get that book into print and out there. And of course, it's a part of history. Now it's sold millions of copies and millions of different in many different languages. But it's just absolutely amazing how an author like that can connect with so many people.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point about children reading books over and over again, and that's another compliment. I once had somebody said to me, some young girl came up to me and said, "Oh, I just loved your book, and I've read it 4 times." I thought, wow. Thank you. Wow, 4 times. That's pretty great. Like, I mean, that's pretty special, right? To have that. But you're so right about children's books, is that especially picture books. I've got a couple picture books coming out, believe it or not. And I do say, like I always say, well, I'm not a children's picture book author. Like I always try to phrase that, and then I think I'm going to have to stop saying that, because I do have a couple coming out. One in 2023 and one in the fall of 2022. So I'm like, oh, maybe I am a children's picture book author. But I tell you, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about writing children's picture books, and they're not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, that's right. It takes.
They're hard. They're really, really hard books to write. I mean, and they're hard books like The Hungry Caterpillar. They're hard books to sell, but they're hard to write too. You do a lot of edits on them, even though people would say that's, oh, it must be easy for people to write picture books. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, it's not an easy genre to write. And one of them is a picture book biography, and I'm finding it to be really challenging. It's a challenging, in fact, I have a really big edit to do on it. And it's just that it's so, I'm gathering so much information that I want to put all this information in, and you only have so many words. Like, like the editor said, we only have so much real estate.
Yeah,
and you got to find the best stories to put into the book. But it's going to be a wonderful book. It's on Joey Moss, who is a boy with Down syndrome, and he passed away at the age of 57, and he worked for the Edmonton Oilers in their training room and for the Edmonton Football Club. Mm-hmm. And he just made such an impact in the world that it's just such a beautiful book to write. I'm just so honored that I'm writing it.
Yeah, it's amazing to get that in your ability to put that out there, to write about that. That was one thing that was on my mind too. It was about authors, whether they be kids or young adults or adults just trying to get into writing. And we asked this as a part of the interview questions I sent to you. What's some advice that you can give to them?
To kids starting to write, or anybody, authors writing.
Anybody, kids or anybody. I mean, I guess there could be different answers for depending on your age, but just authors that are thinking like, I'd love to write a book, whatever it may be.
Okay, so the first thing is you got to write.
Yeah. Like
you have to actually sit down and write. I mean, and you because and you can't be afraid to edit. That's because you can't be afraid, because you can't fix a blank page. So number one, you have to write. I'm not somebody who, I teach a lot of writing workshops, and I never ever say, oh, you need to plot or you need to not plot. I believe that there is that, we always have this discussion when writers get together, are you a plotter or a pantser, right? So I tend to be a little bit more of a plotter. That's just my personality. I like to think of it and I need to know the ending before I start and how I'm going to get there. So that's just a little bit more of me. Not everybody is the same as me. They like to write organically. So I think that you need to be able to say to yourself, this is the way I'm going to do it. You have to get that first draft down on paper. And that's important, because a lot of people will get stuck on their first draft, and the brain does a really weird thing halfway through. And the brain says to you, this is really bad. And then the brain says, I got a really better idea. I got a way better idea. And this new idea will come up and you think, oh, that's a better idea. And then you don't finish the first draft. And I've seen so many people do that, not finish that. Adults and kids, they don't finish the first draft. You got to get to the end so that you can fix it. And that's really important. I think it is anyway, to get to that final thing, and then go back and start to rework it. So that's another thing, is that just don't be afraid to write a crappy first draft either. Like, don't be afraid to write poorly. Like, if you're having a bad day and you think to yourself, oh, I can't do this, I'm sitting in my chair, I don't know what to write, I can't figure it out, just write. Even if you come up with one sentence out of that writing that you did, or one little thought, that's still going to help you progress your work forward.
That's right. Yeah, that's good advice. That's great advice. Well, thank you very much. If you want to go over your books one more time. Again, everyone, we're talking to Lorna Schultz Nicholson, and she has 3 upcoming books. The title of those, again, are Taking the Ice, When You Least Expect It, and Alexander can you pronounce that last name?
Ovechkin.
Ovechkin. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. And all of these books will be coming out soon. And where can they find them? On Amazon and elsewhere?
You should be able to find them on Amazon. Amazon's probably best bet. Indigo, or probably some of them will be on Barnes and Nobles. Online for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Any final thoughts, Lorna?
No, it's just, if you're out there and you're writing and you wanna be a writer, I just tell you, don't worry about being too young or too old, number one, and just keep writing. Just get your story, because everybody has a story to tell, and that's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this interview. We really appreciate it, and take care.
Thank you.